They aren't bad, they're just incompetent. And you might be too. If you've ever had a job, then odds are you've had a boss. And if you're like most people, there's decent odds that you've had a boss that you don't really get along with. In fact, 57% of adults say that they have left a job to get away from a boss or a manager. Not a great statistic, which means that there's quite a few bad bosses out there. There are a few different kinds of bad bosses. There's the toxic boss that is abusive and mean and just a total jerk, not a good person. That is a whole different topic that we're not going to be addressing in today's video. Then there's the incompetent boss, who's not a bad person, they're just really bad at their job. Perhaps one of the most famous incompetent but well-meaning bosses in history is Michael Scott from The Office. People really like The Office. Every year, Americans watch over 50 billion minutes, otherwise known as over 100,000 years worth of The Office. But just because people really like watching Michael Scott be a manager doesn't mean that they would enjoy having him as their manager. In fact, most people would hate it.
I don't hate it, I just don't like it at all.
Despite the many YouTube videos trying to convince you otherwise, Michael Scott is not a good manager. He isn't a terrible person, but he isn't a good boss either.
I am here to scare you straight!
He opens Dunder Mifflin up to so many liabilities that he likely would have been fired a long time ago, let alone the fact that he's probably committed several actual crimes, including multiple instances of sexual harassment, several instances of sexual assault, and just straight up physical assault. So if he's so dysfunctional, how did he end up being the boss? Well, this isn't just another piece of Hollywood embellishment. This is an actual thing that happens pretty much constantly, and it's called the Peter Principle. The idea of the Peter Principle is that everyone will eventually be promoted to the level of their incompetence. Feels pretty stupid, right? Why would we want to promote people to be incompetent? While it doesn't happen in every organization, and it definitely isn't intentional, it's pretty common, and it goes a little bit something like this. We'll use Michael as an example. We don't know Michael's exact career path that he took, but let's hypothetically say he started out as a junior sales rep. As he showed that he was successful, he would be promoted perhaps to a senior sales rep, where now he is also helping train new salespeople. Since he's so good at sales, he does a decent job and continues to sell very well. He's excelling at his job, he's nailing every task you give him. Sure, he's a little bit quirky, but he does get the job done, and he does it well. So, when the regional manager position becomes open, you want to reward him. He interviews pretty decently, and he has a track record of success, so you promote him to be the regional manager. Now that he's the regional manager, he almost never goes out and does sales. You know, the thing that he's actually good at. Instead, he's supposed to be organizing meetings, working with corporate, managing finances, resolving conflicts, and thinking creatively and critically about strategic direction, all of which are things that he isn't good at.
How Michael spends his time. As you can see, we have procrastinating and distracting others, and this tiny sliver here is critical thinking. I made it bigger so that you could see it.
Michael has now been promoted to the level of his incompetence. He's moved up to where he only does the things that he's bad at and doesn't have the chance to do the things that made him great in the first place. And this happens in a lot of places. Just because you're good at marketing or accounting or plumbing or construction doesn't mean that you're going to be good at strategic vision or managing other people. Why would it? They're completely different skills. Yet time and time again, people are promoted for their success at a completely different job. And if you struggle with your boss, there's decent odds that this is why. They aren't good at being a boss. And why should they be? No one's ever taught them how to. They somehow stumbled into it by being good at a completely different thing. And now they just don't know what to do. Odds are they're just as miserable and confused as you are working for them.
I feel like I'm dying inside.
But wait, there's more. There's one other factor that makes things even worse. We've already shown that many managers have little training and perhaps no aptitude for their job. But their job is also nearly impossible even with training. Here's what I'm talking about. In a conventional hierarchy of a company, up at the top, you have your executives, people who are thinking creatively and making broad strategic decisions for the company's direction. They're all about vision, big idea type stuff. And then at the bottom, you have your day-to-day workers, people doing sales, accounting, service calls, plumbing, or just about anything else. And then you have these poor managers and supervisors in the middle who get handed vision from their supervisors and have to somehow figure out how to turn that into easily definable tasks for their subordinates, all with little to no training and, again, perhaps no actual aptitude for management. So you may have the person from corporate come down and say, Michael, we've looked at the company's strategic direction and we need you to cut costs, improve morale, increase employee retention, and make our customers feel like family. And then you're left sitting there trying to figure out how on earth to make all of those things happen. It's no wonder that middle managers are somewhere around 50 to 75% more likely to suffer from depression than other employees.
I am dead inside.
So now that we know why your boss is this way, what can we do about it? The answer is, I don't know. Which is why I have brought in someone who does know. We have with us today Dr. Jaron Harvey, Professor of Organizational Behavior, here to answer the hard questions. Thank you for coming and talking to us today, Jaron. First difficult question is, if you have an incompetent boss, what do you do about it as the employee?
So you've got essentially two options, right? You can quit, leave the organization, or you've got to figure out a way to deal with it. And dealing with it is probably going to be best done by helping your manager. Your manager is probably incompetent in one of three areas or buckets, you could think of them as. So the first one would be technical competence. So your manager may not actually have the skills that they need in this situation. For instance, they may be leading a programming team and they have no idea what a programming language even is. Okay, so you can help them with that. The other bucket would be what we would consider a process bucket. Do they have essentially a system for managing in place where they're going to be able to stay on top of things? For instance, how do they follow up on tasks that are given to people so that you can continue to make progress on things that are interrelated? Help them figure out a way to set up good processes. Last one would be social skills. Essentially, is my manager able to deal with people in a way that helps them to succeed? And if they're not, then you have to figure out a way to have a conversation about the things that they do so that they can improve them. Now, you can't walk up and say, you're a disaster. So you have to identify something. Like the jokes that you tell in meetings, they're not really funny and they make me and 8 out of the other 10 people uncomfortable. We need to maybe not tell these types of jokes. So that's the last bucket, that social skills one, that you're going to have a conversation about.
All right, so the next level up then is, if you are the incompetent boss, you're watching this video thinking, oh my goodness, this is me. What can you do about it to try to fix your situation?
The thing that you have to do that's going to help you the most is essentially swallowing your pride and recognizing that you need some help and you need to have some conversations with the people around you. Now, you can't lead with, hey, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm incompetent, because that's not going to go over well with your manager or your subordinates, right? So you have to frame that conversation in a very different way. You need to look for ways to gain insight into what they need and how you can do that, and then ask for tips. How do I do it better? As a manager, it's essentially a service position. Your job is to make everybody else's jobs easier. And so asking people, how can I do my job better by helping you, should be a really natural thing. And it will, I think, go over pretty well with your subordinates.
Now, I want to get your thoughts on a story, Jaron. I did talk to one manager who ran into this problem, and I want to see how you feel about how they handled it. They were promoting someone who was amazing at their job. She just was a rock star in the organization. So when a manager position opened up, they promoted her, gave her a raise, the whole deal. The problem is, she wasn't that great as a manager, and the person who replaced her wasn't as good as she was. So the whole organization functioned worse because she got promoted. So what the manager decided to do was to let her keep her raise, and he talked to her and asked if she would be more comfortable going back to her old position that she was amazing at. She agreed, and they moved her back to the old position while letting her keep her raise. And then he gathered the rest of the employees and let them know that she had not been demoted because she had failed, that she wasn't a bad employee, that she hadn't done anything wrong, and that she was simply so amazing at this other job that it was better for her to be there. And then he promptly told them that if he heard anyone gossiping about how she had gotten demoted or been punished, he would fire them on the spot. What do you think about that as a solution of someone who made the mistake and then was trying to undo it?
I think that's really a good approach because it's escalation of commitment. If you stick with a bad manager in that situation, you feel like you made the decision and you've got to stick with it, even though it's hurting you. And so stepping back and rethinking who makes sense where is a really mature decision for a manager to make. I think it's great that he, made it very clear that the employee who was being moved back into their old position was valued and was excellent at that position, and that the organization functioned better. And for better or worse, just because, we love to gossip and do other things that aren't actually productive or useful at work, having the conversation and saying, if I hear this, it's not gonna end well for you. I think that's the kind of support that an employee needs. And it sends a very clear, unambiguous signal. So no one's wondering if the person essentially did get demoted because they weren't a good manager. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Jaron. I really appreciate you sharing your expertise. Hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.
It was good chatting with you, Dallin.
Now back to you, dear viewer. As you may have noticed, Jaron's answers were really similar to the concepts we talk about on this channel a lot. It's the same concepts that dictate a lot of normal, healthy relationships. Good communication, honesty even when it's difficult, swallowing your pride and seeking help, having accountability. Turns out the workplace isn't that different. If you are struggling with a boss, or if you are a struggling boss, try these tips out and let me know how it goes. Hopefully it will make your job a little bit of a better place. Once again, thank you so much for watching this video. I know this is a little different from the relationship topics that we usually have tackled, but I think that it's important to address relationships across all parts of life. If you enjoy this topic and want to learn more about relationships in the workplace or organizational behavior type stuff, let me know and we can do more content like this. As always, please like and subscribe. It goes a long way towards helping out the channel, and we'll hope to catch you in the next video.